Okay, hi everybody. My name's John Haslam and welcome to the first Into the Fold talk. Into the Fold's a series of conversations about the future of design and creativity presented by GF Smith. I'd like to introduce Mr. Bryan Edmondson, the founder of C, and Mr. Ben Parker, the co-founder of Made Thought. Hello guys, welcome to Into the Fold.
Hello, John.
Today we'll be discussing and the continuing relevance of paper, the power of great marketing, and how to engage with demanding audiences. Do you mind just talking through the fundamentals of ensuring lasting relationships and how you set about setting those long-lasting, enduring relationships?
Well, a big question, John. Obviously, relationships are everything right now through this virtual world. I think, if I had to be really honest, I've without sort of sounding too complimentary to you guys, I've learned a lot from GF Smith about relationships. You know, the fact that you work with long-term partners builds that amount of trust that allows then, you know, that once you've had that trust, you can then do extraordinary things with it because you trust each other to push each other's agenda and to go to places where you might not normally go. So those lasting relationships from creative to business is absolutely key. The magic to making great work, I think. And actually, that's what I've really learned from working with GF Smith over the years is, you know, the more we work together, the more trust there is.
I'd agree. I think Ben, we very rarely through our business lives have the relationships where they are so trusted that it does take time, obviously, and you have to prove yourself. I mean, that first job with John and Smiths was effectively, we were very young, we were trying to prove ourselves, but then over the years subsequently, there were certain projects that I sort of had to say to John, I really don't know, but just trust me. And he did.
Yeah.
And I think that handful of clients you have through your career, and I can probably name 3, if I'm really honest, maybe 4, that you get to a point where the trust is immense that you can then do something rather wonderful.
I think you just go back to, you know, we had 13 amazing years with Bryan, and then we made that transition to Made Thought. And obviously that was quite a difficult time for, you know, for the relationship between Bryan and I at that particular time, because no one liked saying goodbye, but we didn't say goodbye. We actually stayed together as a unit. We might not have talked to each other for 3 or 4 weeks once, but then we've been friends ever since, you know, and that's what it's all about, because you build relationships that last, and that's.
And I was going to say, John, I was saying to John, Bryan, that I think it's really fascinating. In normal times, we would never have a conversation together like this because it's business, competitive, it's all of that. It's sort of craziness. This moment of stillness that we have, this period that we've got, which we have to see as both a blessing and a curse at the same time. But, you know, the fact that we're actually having a conversation, you know, you've had a 13-year legacy, and here we are picking up the mantle, building on the shoulders of giants and moving that forward. And the fact that we can actually have a conversation, I think is...
I think it is. I mean, these times are very strange. They're strange for everyone. But you got to think that at some point, you know, and think back, what have you actually done during this period?
Ben, what do you think the feeling of the mood in the creative community in the moment? What is that mood?
Well, I think it's a weird one. I think the first week there was a real sense of rabbit in headlights. I think last week there was a sense of realization of, okay, what are we going to do to navigate this? And then I think this week, for me, certainly there's this sense of, well, doing nothing is not an option for any brand or any creative. And you only need to look at the creativity that is being stirred up within everybody right now. So every single home is thinking about creative ways with which to engage their homeschooling children or to cook meals or whatever. This new surge, I believe there's going to be a creativity boom from this moment. And so I think our job is to help open up, you know, as creatives, as brand builders, to work with businesses to see opportunities of when we emerge from this, how will the world be different? Because it will shift. It is shifting, and it has shifted. What are the opportunities? How will people consume? Will they consume with more consideration to the products that they buy? I think all of this is a moment of pause for us to re-use is going to be the new world that we come out of. And I think that is a really fascinating time for designers, creatives, entrepreneurs, business owners to actually create products that are more relevant for a new time.
What do you think creative brands are doing to engage and connect with the community, or maybe they're disengaging?
I think that, I mean, we've probably all seen all of them trying to flog, trying to sell, when there is a moment of utter pause. I think the smart, authentic brands are observing and watching, and choosing a moment right now to, Ben, you're right. There's things will change. Things have changed. We can't go backwards from what's actually happened to all of us within, this extraordinary period. About a month ago, we worked with a climate change group, and it was a launch in London. And someone stood up and said, just imagine one day we'd stop the whole world's aircraft and see what happened to the planet. It's actually happened. It's actually come true. Bar the odd flight here, there, and everywhere, we're grounded. We're all sat in our wherever we are, doing what we're doing, and we're finding a way around it. And it actually does make it's a change of mindset. It's a change of how you do work and carry on with work. And in weeks and months, as we go down and we do the usual plod to our studios and our offices and our places of work, it will be different because we've experienced all of this. So in terms of brands, I think the smart ones and the authentic ones are not selling and not trying to flog.
And Bryan, I was going to pick up on there. I mean, to your point there, who would have thought such a low carbon lifestyle would have been achievable? And you'd have said that 4 weeks ago. Look at us now. I think we suddenly realise that there is a society that surrounds us. I think there's an awakening to that. I think the big question for me is, what lessons can we learn from this? We know what humans are like, all of us. Will we revert to our old ways? And there was a quote I've read this week by David Attenborough, which I've just got on my screen. And he said, there's no moral to be taken from what has happened in the past. We've got a completely blank sheet of paper in front of us. And I think that is such an optimistic viewpoint with which to build. And I'm a big fan of Naomi Klein, who wrote obviously famous books like the No Logo and On Fire. And she's come out with a really fascinating term that actually, as we had our world before us, that normal was the crisis. So we lived, overconsumption, over travel, living at fast forward pace, not having any time for anyone around us, and so on. This has given us a pivot point and a moment to reflect. And I do think that is such a fundamentally exciting time to now conceive and reimagine what that future might be. Even if we only get a fraction of the way there, I think that's quite an interesting place for us to now use this time as creatives, as businesses, to think about that future we want.
The enduring powers of paper, obviously, the world will go on and we will think differently and we will consume differently. I'm just wondering, I truly believe paper is the new digital. I've said that for 2 or 3 years now. The role of paper ensures connection, and digital has allowed paper to become more considered and desirable, medium. It has truly tangible values in many ways. Ben, do you think digital has done a favour to paper?
100% I do. I think we were on a crash course, weren't we, originally with, look at all the junk mail we used to get, we still get, but it was out of control. And so paper became this mass commodity. Yeah. And I think what's interesting, in like so many areas of business, things have become really polarized now. So in the way that like the travel industry as we knew it a few weeks back, you've either got very economy-based, low-end businesses, the EasyJets and so on, or you have the much more high-end, and you've got this sort of extreme of on the spectrum. And I think the paper industry is somewhat fallen into the same thing. You've got the sort of real economy end of the business, and then you have the more premium end, which is obviously much more where GF Smith sits. And I think, people now have a choice about when they use paper. So before, everything used to be put on paper and it was the lowest common denominator. And, the conversation we always have, John, is, when Coutts, obviously the private bank, choose to use paper for their bank statements, they will use a very high-end paper, one that you also stock at GF Smith, in order. Which one?
Crane's Crest.
Crane's Crest, there you go, about the best you can get. And they will use paper, and it will be a selected stock. So I think, you know, the role of digital has actually allowed paper to be released a little bit and to regain its value and stature.
Bryan, what do you think the opportunities are for paper as a medium in the future? How do you think things will change? I mean, maybe next year, just coming through this medium.
I think it follows on from what Ben was saying, that, you know, all those years ago, you did print in mass. And you look back now and you just think, how utterly crazy is that? But you had no alternative. Digital has given an alternative. You know, using Crane's Crest for that bank just now seems quite incredible when the transactions are digital. But when you do have those moments, the idea of a brand is, you know, when you're able to deliver that emotional message, it can be delivered as a tactile piece, whether it be a cover of a brochure that you may even have 1 or 2 copies printed, or a piece of packaging. But it then delivers the ideas of quality without doing mass, and without wasting, and without, you know, God knows how many boxes of brochures that over the years have ran out of date and just got pulped. It is just crazy. And I think now we've got so much flexibility in designing. We can design not in mass, but we can design for one.
That was Into the Fold, April 2020. Thank you, gentlemen.